Hi, everybody. My name is Gal, and if you cannot pronounce Gal, you can go with Galileo. I was head of growth at Gradescope, which is the leading feedback and assessment platform in the US. What we do in a nutshell, here's my clicker, is we help streamline the grading process. We cut grading times in between half and up to 90% for some question types. And we help streamline the grading process and scale meaningful, formative, actionable feedback for students. I'll explain a tiny bit how we do this, but mainly I want to talk about how the grading process is broken, why is it broken, and how can we help scale meaningful student learning. These are a little bit of the numbers on what Gradescope has done. In October 2018, we got acquired by TurnitIn. TurnitIn started about 20 years ago with plagiarism detection, and since has been doing pretty good work in staying kind of in the front lines of education, and they have feedback and assessment solutions for humanities, so everything that's writing, essays, and they acquired Gradescope because our specialty is STEM programs. And this is TurnitIn. You can see the kind of gap in numbers. So TurnitIn is in about 153 countries and will now offer Gradescope in their product offering all over the world. So what I'll cover pretty quickly is why is grading so painful and how is it broken, and then a little bit of solutions and how that helps turn grading into student learning. So a little bit about assessment today. We have online assessment, not an incredibly viable option for exams. It's also hard to handle cheating. There's lock screens and proctoring, but it's not perfect. And often it's actually less rigorous of an assessment than handwritten work. There's also multiple choice questions, but it's very low on the Bloom's taxonomy. It's hard to create good questions and limited feedback to students. It's mostly, did you get it right or wrong? A quick anecdote, we've done some research on our data, and we learned that in order to get the same strength of correlation between a student's achievement in a question and their final score, you'd need to match the kind of correlation you get with one open-ended question, you'd need 6 multiple choice questions. So also actually understanding what student learned is harder with multiple choice. And then there's the constructed responses, which are just a terrible pain to grade, and I'll explain why. These are the STEM programs in the US, so you can see that it's a little bit of a heavy lifting to actually go through the process, the solutions, and see what student actually got and what do they know really well. And this is a tiny bit, just kind of skim through. Instructors don't like grading. They love teaching. They hate grading. It's very painful. It's hard. It takes a ton of time. And there's parts in the grading process, like realizing halfway through that you actually shouldn't take 5 points off. You should only take 3. And then they need to go back to the start of the pile and regrade the whole thing, which some do and some don't. So why is it painful for faculty? Remaining consistent is super hard. The bigger your class is, the harder it gets. The grading process itself is instructors actually doing like 7 different pretty hard tasks that they try to hold together. And one of the things that we do is we kind of let them not have to hold all these different items together by digitizing the process. So consistency is super hard for faculty and terrible for students, by the way, because what we hear from students is that a lot of kind of mental capacity goes to, was I screwed? Did I get the TA that takes more points off, right? So when you take that off, there's actually more cognitive real estate for students to focus on learning. Providing good feedback takes time, and honestly, it's just not scalable. So the largest course used in Gradescope today, I think, is 2,200 students, 2,200. And there's over 100 graders grading at the same time. So back to the consistency, how do you keep things consistent when you have so many different graders grading? And this is a little bit of a paradigm shift that Gradescope offers, because now what's going on currently is instructors say, okay, how do I make this feedback the most concise and the most short I can, because I'm going to have to write this 100, 170, 700 times. And what Gradescope helps them do is you only have to you take the time, write a very thoughtful piece of feedback, and you'll never have to write it again. You just apply it with a click to all the students to which this type of feedback makes sense. You don't get meaningful insights into student learning. So this is a little bit of data that we cover, that we kind of dove into in our database. And these are two students that got the same exact score, but when you go down to the rubric item level and the mistakes they've done, you actually see that their learning and what they take from the course is very different. So you can find more if you're interested. You can Google the average student does not exist, and there's the whole kind of analysis that we've done. So meaningful insights are lost in the grading process. And then it's just a logistical nightmare. You have to carry stacks of paper. If it's a large course, you need to divide them between the different graders. You need to then be in the same room, exchange piles. It's just not great. When it comes to student, why is grading painful? A, it takes too long to receive work. It's been proven that the shorter it is, the shorter the time to feedback is, it's easier for students to actually make the correlation between what they've studied, the feedback that they've gotten, what mistakes they've done, how can they correct that in the future. But sometimes it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get your exam back. A lot of students never get their final exam back. They just get the score because they're already gone to the vacation or they're done with school. Feedback, when present, is rarely actionable. So you'll get a correct, incorrect. Maybe you'll get a you forgot this. And grades are subject to bias and randomness. We're all people. We're all human. Instructors are as well. When it comes to administrators, they care about grading also. And faculty doesn't spend their time efficiently, right? So the more time you spend on grading, the less time you either spend on research or on perfecting your teaching, the materials, helping weaker students succeed. Same element, there's no clear data or insight on student learning. Administrators care a ton about this. And it's hard to correlate with student success and retention. So let's not forget that universities and schools also, a lot of them are businesses, and they need to understand how do they keep students engaged, keep them in school, and it's harder without the data. And then just generally speaking, there's a ton of effort goes into grading, but the data that comes out at the other side is pretty limited. So what do we do to overcome this? So I've coupled these two first ones. A, digitize the process, streamline it. All of the tediousness in the grading process you can take out, which we have successfully done for a lot of it. There's still work to be done. And then flexible shared rubrics among all graders and across all students. Make sure that the grading is very consistent and that we get to scale meaningful feedback. So that feedback I told you that you actually take time to write, you then can just click it onto the right student pretty easily. So this is how our platform looks. On the left, you see students' work. So instructors either scan it onto Gradescope or students will take a picture and upload it to Gradescope. And the instructor kind of grades all of the answers to question number 1, all of the answers to question number 2. So again, even the grading itself, it's not one exam at a time, but one question at a time. And then on the right, what you see is what we call a flexible rubric that instructors can actually create while they grade. So no longer the angst of starting with the optimal rubric. And you can make changes throughout the grading process. So if you need to change the point value or the actual feedback, you can do that. This is how this is a math instructor from Harvard University, and you can see how they built the feedback, how they bake the feedback into the rubric, and then all they need to do is click the number 2 on their keyboard, and that applies rubric item number 2 with the explanation and feedback to that student, which the students then get to view their exam with the rubric items that were applied. The digitization of the grading process actually helps eliminate or minimize cheating, so students can't keep working on their exam after they've gotten it back and then come to office hours and say, oh, look, you've missed my full answer. And it also saves a ton of room and, again, the angst of losing papers. University of Berkeley announced recently that if you've scanned exams onto Gradescope, you don't have to keep the hard copy anymore. They used to have to keep it for like 2 semesters, and then instructors' offices look like a library. Get help from AI. So what we've done for multiple choice questions, short math answers, and short text answers, we actually use computer vision to cluster groups of identical students' answers. And then instead of grading each student's answer one at a time, you grade one student's answer, and all of the rest of the students' answers that answered identically get the same type of grading. Does that make sense? So we'll get buckets of everybody that answered half x squared plus c. All of them I can grade with one grading action. And instructors get to leverage the new data. So here you can see when an instructor is done grading, they actually get access to per question statistics, and they can drill down and have per rubric item statistics. So the most common mistakes, which student made them, so you can then have groups of students that you can work with on certain types of mistakes. And I'll show you a quick video. This is how it looks. It's an example, but you can see how you can drill down into a question. Now you get the rubric items and which mistakes were most prevalent. If you can not take pictures of the next slide, that'd be great. Instructors can also tag questions with concepts and learning objectives. So then you get statistics, not only which mistakes they've done, but which concepts did they get really well and which concepts they don't. And you can see here, this is a computer science course, and you can see that the students get trees and environment diagrams pretty well, but they're having a hard time with higher order functions and recursion. Quick course correction, next lecture I can start 10 minutes and go over these concepts. Next time I teach the course, I know I can reallocate the time and probably spend a little less time on trees and a little more on higher order functions and etc. So just to finish off, grading should provide actionable, formative feedback to students, and it should help students learn, of course. Instructors should have insight and learn how to pace their courses and compare between courses, and help instructors compose assessments, which is where we're going in the near future based on all the data that we have instructors put in the system. And of course, do it at scale, right? So help kind of personalize academic students based on their abilities and on their mistakes and learning. Thank you very much. If you're interested in more information.
Thank you, Gal Friedman.